Okay, we can begin. Tonight's lecture is the last in a series that we began almost a year ago about midot, about character refinement, character development, as we call it, midot. And tonight is number 36, besides the introduction. And I saved it for the very end, even though this midah belongs in the beginning. It's a very important characteristic. It's a very important discipline. And it's called zehirut, caution. And the opposite of zehirut, pezizut. Pezizut is impulsiveness. So we're going to speak about the two of them. Zehirut, caution, and pezizut, impulsiveness. A midah that really belongs in the very beginning, but I left it towards the end because if we leave it towards the end, we will be able to see how this particular midah helps us with the various other midot, with the various other characteristics as well. So it is important to focus on this one because it is a very basic, a very fundamental midah. What is exactly zehirut? What is caution? We translate it as caution in English, but what does caution really mean? Caution includes alertness, to be alert. Alert means that we are aware. Caution also includes prudence. Prudence is already an additional detail which involves sound judgment. It also includes vigilance. To be vigilant means to be careful, to be watchful, to take care of something. All of this is included in the midah of caution. Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair in the Gemara brings down an entire list of ma'alot, of characteristics that help us in growth. And this is approximately the order of which he brings them. Amar Rabbi Pinchas ben Yair, Torah mevi'ah lidei zehirut, zerizut mevi'ah lidei nekiyut. I'm going to translate it afterwards. Nekiyut mevi'ah lidei perishut, perishut mevi'ah lidei tahara, tahara mevi'ah lidei chasidut, chasidut mevi'ah lidei anava, anava mevi'ah lidei yirat chet, yirat chet mevi'ah lidei kedusha, kedusha mevi'ah lidei ruach hakodesh, ruach hakodesh mevi'ah lidei tchiyat hametim. You see a whole list of midot, of steps, of characteristics. Each one is important, but how each one is interdependent on the other one, you can't skip. One leads to the other one. The first one is zehirut. So Rabbi Pinchas says Torah, the learning of the Torah will bring one to be cautious, to be more aware of what he's doing. Caution would lead to zerizut, diligence, which is a midah that we spoke about in the past. To be diligent means to not procrastinate, not to delay things, to take care of things in a timely manner. Very important midah. Once we have developed zerizut, we can grow further to nekiyut. Nekiyut meaning cleanliness. What cleanliness are we talking about? Cleanliness of sin. If one is cautious, if one is diligent, then hopefully he will not get himself dirty in sin. He will not make as many mistakes. Nekiyut mevi'ah lidei perishut. Perishut means to abstain. Abstain is not only to stay away from that which is forbidden, it is also to abstain or to hold yourself back, to control yourself from those things that are permissible. Not to overeat, for example. That's also called perishut. There's more self-control at the level of perishut. And perishut brings one to tahara. Tahara is already purity. That's more than cleanliness. When one is already pure, he doesn't even think of sin. Right? Nekiyut, he has to control himself. He still does battle with his evil inclination. Tahara, he has reached a point because of his perishut, because of his restraint. Right? Because of his self-control, he has grown to the level of purity. Purity brings to chasidut, or piety of sorts. Piety, chasidut, when somebody does more than what he needs to, beyond the call of duty, he's called a hasid. He loves Hashem so much, he's so devoted, he does more than what he's asked to do. He's even more careful with what he needs to be and what he needs to be. That's called Hasidut. And Hasidut leads one to Anava, to true humbleness. There are various levels, degrees of humbleness. Various of these midot we already spoke about, including humbleness. But the true form of humbleness is only after one has grown in these other steps. Humbleness will lead one to Yirat Het, which is the fear of God, the true fear of God, because there's various degrees and levels in that too. There's some who fear punishment. They don't necessarily fear God for what he really is. They don't really fear the sin so much as they fear the punishment. But at the highest level, one is so in love with someone, for example, that he's afraid of ruining the relationship. That kind of fear. It's a higher form of fear. You're not afraid of punishment, you're afraid of ruining the relationship. That's called Yirat Het. Yirat Het leads to the level of Kedusha, being elevated above the laws of nature. Kadosh means that you're closer and more attached to Hashem. Kadosh means holy. And this level of holiness leads to Ruach HaKodesh, which is divine inspiration. What's interesting about Ruach HaKodesh, which is a form of prophecy, it is a very spiritual form of knowledge to know things that are beyond the human mind. This can be acquired even by non-Jews. Eliyahu Navi mentions this in the Sefer Tanat Ve'Eliyahu, that he swears, whether it's a man or a woman, a slave or or free man, Jew or non-Jew, everyone, depending on his deeds, according to his deeds, he will merit to attain Ruach HaKodesh, this tremendous level where he can actually know certain things through divine inspiration. So this is a very high level. And this level, of course, at the very end, leads one or gives one the capability at some point of Tehiyat HaMetim, of being able to bring back those who have died. There have been incidents, like Eliyahu Navi himself, bringing back those who have already been dead. So this is an example of a list of characteristics that are very important. We see where they lead us to. They're all important because they need each one. Each one needs each other. In order to be able to go to the next step, you have to have excelled in the first step, in the more basic step. But in the end, this is something that we can all do. We can all attain this. This is not just something reserved for special people. Anyone, any neshama is capable of growth, is capable of working on himself, and if he follows this, as the list prescribes, he will be able to reach the greatest heights. But tonight we're speaking about zehirut, just about caution, and its opposite counterpart, pizizut, or impulsiveness. How do we define it in the most simplistic form? What's the significance of caution? One who wants to be cautious needs, at the very basic level, to be able to distinguish between right and wrong, good and bad. At the very basic level. To be cautious about what? So, first of all, one has to identify, one has to be very familiar with what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is bad. Then, he will need to look at himself and say to himself, wait a minute, and what I just did is right or wrong? So we have the knowledge of that which is good, which will enable us to pursue, hopefully, the right things and good things in life. We need the knowledge of that. We need to be familiar. We need to know what things are destructive, no good, so we can run away from them, stay away from them, maintain a distance from them. But once we've become familiar with them, we have to, from time to time, analyze ourselves and ask ourselves, the way I am right now, or what I have just done, is this right or is this wrong? Is this good or bad? So caution, at the very basic level, requires familiarity with right and wrong, and after that, analysis or introspection, where one tries to figure out, where am I? Am I good or bad? Are these actions right or wrong? This analysis, by the way, you can do at the time you are doing something, or after the fact that you have done it. You say to yourself, what I just said, what I just did, was that right or wrong? If we don't figure these things out, if we don't think about them, and we go on with our life the way we've always been doing, we can be making many mistakes. And by the time we realize that, it may be very late in life. It's never too late to correct mistakes, but it makes a big difference. So caution, zehirut, you can see right now, you can begin to appreciate how important this midah is and how much it could help us in life once we've become familiar with what is right and what is wrong. Rabbis tell us that statistically, noach lo l'adam shelo nivra, it would have been better off for man not to be created, because statistically, the chances are that he will make many mistakes. Statistically, a lot of people succeed, but many more people fail. So it would have been better off not to be born. But obviously, Hashem gives us the opportunity of life. He brings us into this world against our will and wishes, but He gives us the opportunity to grow, to become close to Him, and to earn our ticket for Olam Haba, for the world to come. What happens as a result of being born? Since this is against our wishes, since we are facing continuously all kinds of challenges in life, what should we do in order to succeed? Is there any one exercise that can help us to give us better chances to succeed, since the odds are against us? And the answer is yes. The rabbis tell us, "Mi'achshav shenivra yefashpesh b'ma'asav." Now that He's already created, it's a fact. It's a done deal. We are here. Now that you are here, yefashpesh b'ma'asav. Examine your deeds. Examine regularly, continuously. You can do it once a day, once a week, but try to do it more often than not. Not once a year for Rosh Hashanah and Kippur. This is a very important exercise. Yefashpesh b'ma'asav. Examine yourself, because nobody may point it out to you. You will be hopefully the only one that will notice it. I mean, your spouse may notice it too. And some things your spouse may never know either. So, if anybody, you be the one to judge yourself, to analyze your maasim, your deeds, and ask yourself, where are you holding? In which direction are you headed? So, yefashpesh b'ma'asav therefore involves chakirot. It involves continuous analysis and pondering your present situation as to what do I need to do to correct something, to correct a wrong. Be'ezet tahbula. What should I use? What method should I use to be able to rid myself of this terrible weakness that I have? Let's say somebody analyzes his life. Let me give you an example which is very, very relevant to many people. Somebody looks at his life one day, nobody is home, everything is quiet. You know, when people are home, it's noisy, the phones are ringing. You grab a moment, you're all by yourself, and it doesn't have to be at home, it could be in the forest. And you say to yourself, wow, time flies. I'm over 65 years old, not me, right? This person was thinking, I'm over 65 years old. Where has all the time gone? What have I accomplished? Time flies. We know that. And he says, but wait a minute. I always had these grand plans. I always wanted to do this, and that. What happened? Why didn't I do it? He starts thinking. He always got distracted. Always something came up, which was not necessarily more important. And what is he really dealing with? Does anybody know what his problem is? There is a word for it, there's a term for it in English that is very, very famous. What is this man or this woman's problem? Again, what has happened to him? He's 65 or she's 65 years old, many plans, very ambitious, many things to accomplish, good things to accomplish, and he's capable of doing it. Somehow he lost it, he never got around to do it. Could there be here a problem that he has that he needs to work on? And the answer is, what is that? No, procrastination is just a little detail, but it's only one detail that may have applied to some of his delays. But there could be other factors too. Procrastination delays is of course a very unfortunate common thing, but there's a bigger problem of which procrastination belongs to, and it's called time management. Many of us have this problem. We do not always succeed, even if we want to, even if our intentions are good, we do not always succeed to manage our time properly. And because of that, so much time, precious time, is wasted on shtuyot, on nonsense, on things like checking your email 10 times a day. Yeah, check your email twice a day, not 10 times. Unless you have a business, that's your business email, that's something different, right? There are many things that distract, and I've spoken about this several times. Distraction is the greatest weapon the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, has. You come into this world, it's like coming to Disneyland for the first time. You want to see everything. They give you even a map. They show you how to go, right? They describe to you, and you say, oh great, I want to see the Pirates of the Caribbean, right? I want to see It's a Small World, all the good things of Disneyland. But all of a sudden, somebody comes to you and says, you want to buy some popcorn? And you buy. You want some ice cream? You buy. You start becoming distracted with all these things that are not important. And before you know it, it's 6 o'clock in the afternoon, the whole day went by, you're looking around, talking to people, looking at things. You never went to one ride. And before you know it, you have to leave because they closed the place down. Before a person realizes, the boat comes and picks him up and he goes to Shamayim. You can't tell him, stop, wait, I still have to accomplish. There's no more time. You were given so many years. What did you do with it? What did you do with the time, the most precious commodity? So therefore, examination is so important. Teshuvah is a form of examination. When we do Teshuvah, Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, we think about it a lot. It involves examining our deeds. What is it that I need to correct? What is important that I need to work on? One of the greatest problems or obstacles in making us stop to think about life is the homer, the materialism in this world. The materialism, all the pleasures of life, all the things that we want to have, enjoy, they take away a lot of our time, they distract us, and they're also stumbling blocks, michsholim. I call them stumbling blocks because many times we think something is good and it's really bad. We think it's sweet and good and it's really sour and very, very hurtful, very dangerous even. So here, because of the homer, the physicality of this world, we are confused. What appears to be nice and attractive is really maybe dangerous. We have to be careful not to spend so much time with it. So the homer, the physicality of this world, unfortunately puts many michsholim, many obstacles in our way. And if we're not aware of them, we won't be able to be cautious. That's the significance, the importance of analyzing from time to time what we're doing with ourselves. So that is why zehirut, caution, the midah of caution, appears at the very beginning of the list. And this midah is not possible for us to undertake unless it is accompanied with Torah. As the Rabbi himself said, Torah mevi'ah lidei zehirut. It will be the knowledge or the learning of Torah that will lead one to be cautious. Rabbis tell us in different words, En bur yerehet velo amaretz hasid. A bur means an ignoramus, can never be a God-fearing person. Without Torah, it will not be possible forever for him to become so refined to be God-fearing. Without Torah, he's ignorant. He doesn't see a reason to be a yerehet. He's not even pulled in that direction. It's not in his list of priorities. Velo am haaretz hasid. One who does not regularly learn, one who's not so knowledgeable, cannot be a true chassid, a true pious person. He doesn't see any reason to be like that. You know what this reminds me? A funny story. The Chafetz Chaim was a great tzaddik, very big tzaddik. And he was asked once to intervene for a Jew who was caught and blamed for some crime. Rabbi, please go give a report how you know this man to be an upright person, not a criminal. And if the judges see you, a respectable man, the rabbi of the community, giving testimony for him, hopefully they'll be more lenient with him. So the Chafetz Chaim went to court. It's a big mitzvah. So some people went along with him and told the judges, Your Honor, you know who this witness here is? This witness is so pious, he's such a tzaddik, such a hasid, that once a thief broke into his house and the whole family was going to try to get that thief. And this rabbi said, no, let him go. Let him go. Don't run after him. This is the kind of rabbi this man is. This is the kind of pious man this is. So you know what the judges said? The goyim. That's impossible. There's no such human being like that. The goy cannot fathom, cannot understand how there can be such a man, such a human being, who would not mind you stole something from him, who would not run after the thief if you could. And he was forgiving, and he says he probably needs it. He probably is desperate, this thief. Look how this great man, this great tzaddik, thought. So the goyim, of course, thought that that's impossible. This kind of human beings don't exist. But they do. They can exist if people work on themselves. And this was a great man who worked on himself very, very much. And that is why he was able to grow to such great heights. But without Torah, it is not possible. Why? Why does the Torah help us so much with this midah and with any other midot? What benefit do we derive from the Torah? On the very basic level, Torah is knowledge. Without the knowledge, how is one going to know how to keep kosher? How is one going to know what family purity is, especially the women? And how is one going to know how to keep Shabbat? There's so many halachot, details in Shabbat. Anyone who does not review Shabbat, the halachot, even though he learned it once, he does not review it, he's going to make mistakes. It's almost impossible for him to observe Shabbat properly without any mistake from time to time if he does not review the halachot of Shabbat. There's so many. How could you not make a mistake from time to time? So at the very basic level, Torah is knowledge. We need therefore the Torah. If we want to be cautious, we want to make sure we don't make any mistakes, then we need to be knowledgeable about areas of halachot, areas that involve rules, laws, commandments. There's another area in the Torah called Nezikin. If you look at the Gemarot, there's a whole seder of Nezikin. Many masechtot, many tractates, many books, many halachot about the area called Nezikin, damages. And only one who learns those halachot knows how he has to be careful with his neighbor. Two people living next to each other. What if you make a barbecue close to your neighbor's house? You know, the fire can go over to his side. You have to be sensitive, you have to be careful, you have to be aware, because it could be that you will damage your neighbor's property. So without Torah, without knowing these halachot, how will one be sensitive? How will one be knowledgeable about these things? Of course, if there's a disagreement, there's an issue, he's going to go to Bet Din, to the court. But when one learns about these things, he becomes more sensitive. He's more cautious about these things. And then there's the area of what comes out of our mouth, not what enters our mouth. You know, a lot of people are very careful what they put into their mouth. They're kasher, but they're not careful at all with what comes out of their mouth. Lashon hara, cursing, nedarim u'shvuot, just making promises all the time, swearing and not keeping their word. People need to be careful with what comes out of their mouth even more than what goes into the mouth. So you have all kinds of situations that are very dangerous that involve one's mouth. Without Torah, how will one know the seriousness of this? Or as we call it in Hebrew, take an example, something called plitat peh. Plitat peh in English would be an utterance. You just said something came out of your mouth. That's called plitat peh. And that plitat peh was very insulting to your wife. How are you going to take it back? It was said already. It was said already. You know, when something comes out of the mouth, how are you going to take it back? You took money from someone, you can pay him. Right? There's a lot of ways to compensate and to fix situations. How do you fix a word that was said? A word is like an arrow. It's shot, it hurts someone. It's very difficult to take back. The damage is done. Obviously, we can ask forgiveness. Obviously, we can try our best to make sure it doesn't happen again. But if we're not cautious, if we're not careful with what we do, we don't realize how serious these words are, that it's going to repeat itself. It's going to happen over and over and over again. A person who's cautious, a person who learns Torah and understands this is wrong. I should never say it. I should have to be careful 10 times before I say it, because it might have the wrong effect. Lashon Hara is the same thing. Am I allowed to say this about someone? Somebody comes and asks you, what do you say? What's your opinion? Should I be his partner? He wants to be my partner in business. And you know this guy is a dishonest guy. He doesn't pay on time. He cheats people. He doesn't. He's not straight in his taxes. Can you tell him that, or is that lashon hara? Lashon hara means slandering, gossiping. And the answer is, in this particular example, yes, you better tell him, because if you don't tell him, you're getting him into trouble. This potential partner is going to get involved with a man who's not honest. He's going to ruin the business. He's going to get him into trouble. How do we know what to say, what not to say, if we do not learn the halachot, the Torah? Once we learn, then we're going to be more careful. Okay, this is serious stuff. I better be careful. I better learn what am I allowed to say, what am I not allowed to say. The same is true in the area of tum'ah and tahara, especially during the time of the Beit HaMikdash. Especially Kohanim, they had to be careful with laws of purity. What was tameh, what is tahor, how to deal with it. Another area is business matters. There are all kinds of areas that if one does not learn Torah, he will not know what he's doing is right or wrong. He will therefore have no incentive to be cautious. Once we know what is right from what is wrong, then, of course, if we realize how serious this is, hopefully we will be careful. The learning of the Torah has two more advantages, has many advantages. But one of the very important advantages is that this is the most powerful, potent weapon that we have against the Yetzer Hara. If one learns Torah, he has a better chance to defeat the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, in battle. What's the Yetzer Hara? Yetzer Hara could be anything. It could be a weakness of laziness. It could be a man loves to eat a lot. He likes women. He's an angry person. He's a stingy person. All kinds of weaknesses. It's a Yetzer Hara. If one learns Torah, the Torah gives him the fuel, the energy, to be able to do battle with the Yetzer Hara, because it reminds him, it shows him the way, it guides him, it strengthens him, encourages him. If he's depressed, it takes him out of his depression. So many benefits are gained from learning Torah for a few minutes every day. And we need to do battle with Yetzer Hara because he's always there from the moment we're born till the day we die. So the Torah is the most powerful weapon against the Yetzer Hara. Plus, it is only by way of learning Torah that we can actually begin to work on our midot, on our character. If one wants to refine his character, he wants to refine his nature, he needs Torah. Otherwise, he will have no incentive. He will not be motivated. There's no motivation to change. Torah includes, by the way, Sifrei Musar. When I say Torah, I don't only mean Gemara or Chumash or Kabbalah. All of that is Torah. I'm also talking about Musar. Musar is what we're learning a little bit here. It is ethics, morals, values. When we learn it, whether from Pirkei Avot or from other books, we gain tremendous knowledge, great advice, and we get direction on how to succeed in life. We don't want to fail. And success, by the way, is not only in business matters, it's in marriage too. Do you know that for the most part, not always, a couple that gets divorced has failed? It sounds a little harsh, but that's the reality. I'm not talking about all divorces. There are some divorces there's no choice, it's actually a mitzvah to get divorced. There are some situations like that, terrible situations, where that's the only solution. I'm not talking about those. I'm talking about the majority of cases where people just are fed up with each other and get divorced. You know what they've demonstrated to the world? They've failed. They have failed in marriage. They just simply did not figure out how to get along. Hashem put you together. That means there is a great chance that you can succeed. What is missing? Guidance. As we say in Hebrew, as some rabbis who speak about this topic have said in Hebrew, En zug lo mutzlach, yesh rak zug lo mudrach. There's no such a thing as an unsuccessful couple. But there is something called a couple that has no guidance. To be unsuccessful, anybody can be successful if they really want to. But there are a lot of couples that have no guidance. They don't learn. What do I do in this kind of a situation? My wife is like this and like this and like this. My husband is like this. What do I do? What's the best way to deal with it? If you can't figure this out all on your own, you're not expected to. Which is going to lead us to another point very soon about seeking advice from others. Don't try to figure out things all on your own. You may not know how to. When we are in prison, we need somebody on the outside to open the door for us to get out. We can't do it ourselves. If you have a problem, then seek help. So the Torah, with learning Torah, we are able to begin to work. It guides us. It reminds us, what are you arguing about? This is silly. This is shtuyot. This is childish. You, an adult, you're mature. You're going to argue about this. You're going to ruin your relationship for this. This is silly. If one does not have Torah, he may argue about silly things. And you know what? A lot of times the arguments are about silly things. They're not major issues that require tremendous amount of thought. Silly things. Each one blames each other. The husband accuses his mother-in-law, right? By the way, many, many times, it's the in-laws that ruin the relationship. They try to get involved, interfere, all kinds of things that don't belong in a marriage. They have nothing to do with reality. Husband and wife are supposed to be the closest individuals in the world. Once you get married, the parents are out. They're not abandoned. You don't abandon them. Kibud avayim, you honor them for the rest of your life. But the husband and wife, that's the center of the relationship, the center of love, the most important circle. Outside that circle comes the children, and outside of that circle comes parents, in-laws, friends, but husband and wife. Vayule basar echad. Without learning Torah, one doesn't think so. There are some cultures, mentalities, well, the parents are very important. They're so important, that sometimes the husband has to tell his wife, listen, it's either your parents or me. And what should the wife say? You. You think she's going to do that? If she's close to her parents? If she really loves her husband and she wants to succeed in the marriage, she better say that. If the man is a good man, we're talking about, he's a normal man, he's a good man, the husband comes first. In the same way, the other way around. There are some husbands who are so close to their mother, they're watching over their mother, she's a widow. Oh, that's a big problem. That's very nice of you, you're watching over her, but your wife comes first. Some husbands don't want to accept that. Well, that's a recipe for a disastrous relationship. They have to accept it. Torah says your wife comes first, before anybody else. We have to get that into our mind. Nobody else is as important as the two of you. But what happens after many years of arguing and bitterness? None of them two want to think like that anymore. Everybody else is more important than they are, because they're so fed up. Once you're fed up, you can't think healthy. That's why it's important to get this at the time of the chuppah, when you're in love with each other, when you really want to be together. And if the roots are made, strong roots are made during that first year, then hopefully they will remain so for the rest of the life. But even if they are good and healthy in the beginning, you still have to nourish it. You still have to nourish the relationship. Otherwise, a lot of outside pressures can tear you apart. All kinds of pressures, bills, kids, right? All kinds of things, business, pressures that can tear a good relationship apart. But if you're smart and you're cautious, you're careful, you're prudent, you're alert, all the things that we mentioned in the beginning, then you won't let things get out of hand. So with Torah, we have a better chance of identifying these problems. If you learn Sefer Vayikra, you will find that there's big emphasis on korbanot, sacrifices. What's this whole about sacrifices? A great deal of the sacrifices are to correct our mistakes. We've committed sins bishgaga, usually unintentionally. Torah says, okay, bring an animal, a sacrifice. What's the animal for? The real repentance and the real teshuvah is the confession, the vidui, I'm sorry, I commit myself not to do it again. That's the real teshuvah. What's the animal for? Besides being a penalty of $100 or whatever it costs to bring a sheep, besides that, the rabbis tell us when one brings an animal as a sacrifice, he's being reminded in a symbolic way, Asita ma'aseh behemah. You've just committed an animalistic act. Animalistic? It was unintentional. Yes, but you have sechel. You are a human being, you're not an animal. A human being has sechel, has intelligence. You should have been careful. An animal, you can't blame, because an animal does not really have sechel, does not have a mind. They do have a little bit, but not a lot. So you can't blame them for making mistakes, for doing something unintentionally. But you've just committed an animalistic, you've behaved like an animal. So that's the idea, one of the ideas of bringing a korban, an animal, to remind one, dir balak, as we say in Arabic, in the future, be careful, don't do it again, don't behave like an animal. Shlomo Melech therefore tells us, Ashrei Adam mefahed tamid. One is fortunate if he's always concerned, if he's always afraid. Afraid of what? Not afraid of an enemy. As David HaMelech, his father, says, Gam kilech begeis al mavet lo yerara, ki ata imadi. David HaMelech says, even when I walk in the valley of death, I'm not afraid. And here his son says, be afraid. David HaMelech is talking about his enemies, human enemies. Don't be afraid, Hashem is with you. What are you going to be afraid of? But Ashrei Adam, Shlomo says in Mishlei, fortunate is a person who's always mefahed of sin. He should always be concerned that he shouldn't trip, he shouldn't make a mistake, he shouldn't do something even unintentional. That's one idea behind the mefahed here. Be afraid that you shouldn't make the mistake. But what is there to be afraid of? If you did it once, it could happen again. As the rabbis tell us in the Midrash, what should a person worry about when he committed a sin unintentionally? It's unintentional. Hashem knows it's unintentional. He forgives me. No, you should be afraid that it may happen again, because now that you've done it once unintentional, niftahlo, the door has been opened up wide open, and the second time around it may be easier for you to repeat the mistake. If you did it once, it can happen a second and a third time. So be afraid and rightfully be concerned that it shouldn't happen again, because it happened to you once. If it happened once, it can happen again. So you don't want this to happen. You don't want to sin. Asher Adam mefahed tamid, also that we should never make any mistakes. And for that reason, one has to be careful not to minimize anything that happens that is wrong, that is questionable. Don't minimize it. So be always concerned about making a mistake. A lot of people say, it's okay, I made a mistake. No, don't minimize it. Be always concerned. A person who minimizes it, he will never be cautious. You want to be careful, you want to be alert, you want to be vigilant about your conduct, then you can't minimize things. You have to be more serious about it. And because of that, we have a famous passage in Chazal. The rabbis tell us, "Aroeh sota b'kilkula yazir et atzmo min hayayin." A sota is an incident in which a woman very possibly cheated on her husband. She betrayed the trust. She went off with somebody else and had an affair. And as a result of that, the Torah tells us what the procedure is to find out the truth. Maybe it's not exactly so. You're only suspecting her of doing that. So the Torah has a mechanism through which the woman is examined to see if she actually committed the sin or not. But anyway, in the end, whatever happens, whether she dies or whether they get divorced, this home has been destroyed. This house in Israel has collapsed. So the rabbis tell us, when you see a sotah bikilkula, if you ever see such an incident where a home has collapsed, a divorce, today we don't have sotah in the exact same way we had it in the Torah. We have different kinds of problems that make the house collapse. So we can borrow the same idea. If you ever see a house collapsing, the husband and wife getting divorced, the rabbis tell us, Yazir tatzmo min hayayin. Abstain from wine. What is the meaning abstain from wine? Because wine leads to levity of the mind. Lekaleh hadat. It could lead one to become drunk, to be sinful. The rabbis use that as an example of stay away from that which can bring you to trouble. It doesn't have to be wine. You see many houses today, unfortunately, are collapsing or falling apart, divorces. What does that tell you? Look at them and ask yourself, what did they do wrong so I should be careful with? So you see how this midah is necessary when you can apply it. Young couple is getting married. Look around. All these people, over 50%, unfortunately, and by goyim even more, have gotten divorced. You know what I just recently heard? There is a Persian photographer who has many albums in his office of weddings. Albums of weddings. So somebody asked him, a young couple asked him, what are all these albums? He says, traditionally, I customarily take a deposit before the couple gets married for photographing the wedding. And when they're supposed to come pick up the pictures, they bring the balance, right? That's about 6 to 8 weeks later. They never end up coming because they get divorced, many of them. I have accumulated all these albums, he says here, because these are from couples that never ended up coming together because they got divorced a few weeks after their $100,000 or $200,000 affair. You know, they're expensive affairs. Look how much money they spent on flowers and shtuyot, and they get divorced very quickly, right? Did I say something which is exaggerated? I think all of you know about this, right? It happens too much. So when you see this, you don't have to see it at the photographer's office. When you hear about this, that's similar to haroes sotah bikilkula. You're seeing a house collapsing, you're seeing divorces, ask yourself, wait a minute, what's wrong? Are they doing something wrong? It's not the fault of the rabbi, by the way, who married them, right? It's not the fault of the matchmaker. He did his best, or she did it. The two people. What's going on? Something is wrong. Something is rotten. Maybe they don't know what life is about. Maybe they don't know how to get married. Somebody is doing something wrong. They're not being taught. If you have so many planes crashing, not once a month. Once a month, a plane crashes. It's pilot error, storms. Yes, mechanical. What if you start chas v'shalom? What if you open up the newspaper or if you hear the news for the next month? Every other day planes are falling off the sky, especially a certain model. What are you going to say? Are you going to say pilot error? No. You're going to say that most likely there is a problem in the manufacturer. At the manufacturing plant, if so many are falling, then it's not mechanical. It's not coincidence. It's not just min hashamayim. There's something wrong at the plant. They're being manufactured wrong. The marriages, if there's so many are collapsing, they're not working out. They're not living right. There's something that they're doing wrong. Obviously. So that's the idea here. Aroes sotah bikilkula. You see a sotah, you see a woman like this, you see a house collapsing. Yazir tatzmo. It doesn't have to be wine. It could be anything that is a michshol, anything that is an obstacle that is allowing this to happen. What is it? Well, figure it out. Do an in-depth study of what's wrong with this couple. What are they doing wrong? They're making many mistakes, not just one, many mistakes. And I hear about it every single day. Almost every other day, I get situations like this. All kinds of issues that are very typical all over the world. But some people are strong and they deal with it, they are patient with it, they seek help, and more or less they get along. I don't expect, by the way, every couple to be like two doves. Crazy glue. They can't separate from each other until they die. There are people like that. They're so in love, for the next 50 years they can't separate. These things exist, but they're very few. People have differences, people have issues, people have weaknesses, and you have to live with it, because you made a commitment under the chuppah. B'ezrat Hashem, for the rest of our lives, we'll be together. Let me ask you something. A husband marries a wife and she becomes paralyzed. He loves her very, very much, but she's paralyzed after 10 years. Is he going to drop her and throw her out? Hopefully not, if he loves her. The same thing the other way around. What if the man became paralyzed after a couple of years? She loves him, they have children together, he was a great husband, but he became paralyzed. Should she throw him out in the street? He can't function anymore. What do you say? Huh? It would be cruel to do something like that. I mean, if there are no kids, if it's after a year, a person has to have a normal life. Can't blame them. But once you've made a solid relationship, you have children together, to just throw away the relationship because something is not right with him or her, they just stop functioning, that's cruel. You're going to just let him rot out there? What did he do wrong? What did she do wrong? Well, people are selfish. When people are selfish, they can think of that. But if a person is unselfish, he says, that's my fate. I have to live with it. I got into it. This is what I got myself into. This is what Hashem wants me to. I'm going to take care of her for the rest of her life. Or she will take care of him for the rest of his life. That's her duty, his duty. They got into this. They didn't get into this just to try it out. But if people don't make a real commitment, it could easily fall apart. So what do we need to do in order to succeed? We said learning Torah is a very, very valuable tool. But so is asking for advice. Rabbis tell us, "Aseh lecha rab v'tistalek min hasfekot." Make yourself a rabbi. Find yourself somebody that you can ask questions. And in this way, tistalek min hasfekot, you won't have doubts. We have doubts. Why have the doubts? Ask, so you won't have doubts. And when a person eliminates doubts, he's happier. Yoter sameach. He's calm, ragua. He figured it out. Make yourself a rabbi, get yourself somebody, seek advice, professional help, have no doubts. That's another important idea. And my favorite is the next one. People get married, people go into business, people do all kinds of major things in their life. But they forget about life. They are aware of their business, they're aware, hopefully, a little bit of their marriage and their children. These are all important things. But they forget about life. The bigger picture is lost, is not focused on. Life is something serious. And if life is something very, very serious, doesn't it pay for us to look into it, to figure out what I really need to do with my time? If this is something serious, aren't we going to be more careful about it and try to manage it and approach it seriously? If it's something important to us. And the following mashal, I think, pretty much clarifies this point. Imagine you come to a wedding and somebody comes over to you and says, I was just in the kitchen and by mistake some poison fell into the soup. Don't have it. Don't eat the soup. And you're saying, well, should I believe him or not believe him? So you ask the people in the kitchen, and they say, no, the soup is good soup. Everything is okay. Are you going to take a chance and eat the soup? Everybody says it's okay, and one says it's not okay. Or let's take another example. You're about to take some medication. 99 doctors tell you this is good for you. One doctor says you better not take this because this is poison. It's going to kill you. Are you going to still take a chance and take it? 99 said it's okay. I hope not. Because even if one guy said it's poisonous, it's harmful, It's not worth it. It's not worth it to take a chance when we're talking about your life, right? Is it worth it? It's not worth it. Don't eat the soup. Don't take it. It's not worth it. Because it could be his right. The Jew who has not grown up with Judaism has many issues, has doubts, sfekot, questions. Is this right? Is this wrong? Here it says, if I don't do this, I go to Gehenom. Should I believe it? Everybody else seems to be doing anything they want, and it seems to be that they're getting away with it. All these evil people, they're cheating, they're lying, they don't keep Shabbat, nothing happens to them. And here the Torah says, you better not do it. You better be careful with this. Better be careful with that. But let me ask you something. Why take a chance? You're in doubt? Why don't you study it? Study it for yourself. Take a closer look. Life is important. Are you willing to lose Olam Haba? Are you willing to go eventually to Gehenom just because you were lazy and you didn't want to investigate? You didn't want to check it out? You were willing to believe everybody else that nothing, it's okay? If somebody tells you, this is not somebody, this is all the generations from Matan Torah, Har Sinai, telling you that this is the Torah, that this is Torah min hashamayim, this is what you should do and this is what you should not do. You're not going to be careful with that? You're going to take a chance? Why? Study it. Be careful. You have nothing to lose. Shabbat is so beautiful. You have to work on Shabbat. I wish every day was Shabbat. Right? Why take a chance? This could be your whole life is dependent on this. People take that chance anyway. And that's only because of the lack of knowledge. They're ignorant. They don't learn. If they would sit down and learn, they would think differently. But Yetzer Hara, of course, prevents many people from sitting down to learn. That's his job, and he does a very good job. Unfortunately, he succeeds too many times. What have we seen till now? We've covered a little bit about the importance of this midah called zehirut, caution. How it's important to be cautious in life, how there's so much to gain but so much to lose. And if we don't have the proper guidance, we don't have the Torah, the chances of success are not as great. What's the opposite of zrizut? Pzizut, impulsiveness. There's a saying in Arabic, El-ajal min al-shaitan, or in Hebrew, achipazon ze mi-satan. And in Farsi, I'm sure they have something similar. Right? Impulsiveness comes from the Satan. Why be impulsive? Why rush to do something? As we say in Arabic, shwaya shwaya, take it easy, slowly, don't rush into it. Be careful not to ever rush into things. Most of the time, you're going to make blunders. Anybody that rushes, anybody who's impulsive, throughout his life, he will make many blunders, many mistakes. At home, at work, in marriage, in halachot, and in driving too. Because that impulsiveness in his nature will be in his driving too, in everywhere. So he's going to make mistakes all over the place. That's why the rabbis are being asked, Hevu metunim badin. Be careful, be slow to deliberate. Even though you know the halakha, you've learned it many times, review it. You heard the case already many times, review the case. Maybe there's something different about this case. Don't rush to judgment. Don't rush to make a decision here. Even though you know your experience, Hevu metunim badin, be very careful. Make sure you hear testimony. Make sure you investigate it. You look at it thoroughly. Don't rush. The more so we, from time to time, are also asked to judge. Not in a court, but we judge. We judge our wife, we judge our husband, we judge our kids, we judge our friends, we judge human beings, people. We judge people and we have an opinion about them, that's what judging is, because of what they did or said to us. Wait a minute. Have you given him or her the benefit of the doubt? Have you really looked into it before you reached the conclusion, before you judged? Come home, husband is tired and he's hungry, and dinner is not ready. He's upset at his wife. Did you first ask to see what happened? Maybe she came late. Maybe she was in the hospital for some reason. Maybe there was some emergency. Don't rush to judgment. Be very careful. Don't be impulsive. Impulsiveness will lead to many mistakes. Rabbis also tell us besides giving people the benefit of the doubt, Al tadun et chavercha ad shetagia limkomo. Don't judge your friend unless you've been in his shoes. Have you heard that expression, that saying? Don't judge your friend unless you have been in his shoes, until you put yourself in his shoes. What would you have done if you're in his situation? People are quick to judge and to reach conclusions. It's wrong. What would you have done? So be very careful not to rush to conclusions. But where does this impulsiveness come from? There are people who have this kind of a nature. But what is impulsiveness all about? If we take it apart, what is impulsiveness? I would like to say impulsiveness includes two parts to it. I'm not going to diagnose the whole psychology here, but very simply and basic, the impulsiveness includes or has two things: abundant energy and a narrow focus. Okay, and hear this carefully. Abundant energy and a narrow focus. Now, why a narrow focus? If you've ever used the binoculars or a telescope, you will understand. In a binoculars or in a telescope, you sometimes have the ability to adjust the focus. You gain and you lose by doing so. What do you gain and what do you lose? If you want to see something very, very sharp in the greatest detail, you magnify the power, but your scope is smaller. Right? You want to see a bigger picture. You want to see not just the rings of Saturn. You don't only want to see the moon, the craters. You want to see the bigger portion of the sky. Then you have to reduce the power, the magnification. You can see more, but not in as much detail. A person who's impulsive, because he puts so much magnification, I call it, so much power, he's so much energy, he sees a smaller picture. He never sees the bigger picture. If he would see the bigger picture, he would not rush. Most of us who are not impulsive, we want to do the right thing. We want to make sure we've covered everything. We want to see all the sides. We want to see as much as we can of the big picture. So we don't want to rush, because we want to see more. A person, therefore, who is impulsive, he has all this energy, and as a result of that, also, he has a narrow scope. And because of that, he doesn't see everything. He never sees the whole picture. A person who's impulsive, what that already tells you is that he doesn't have sablanut, patience, something that we spoke about before, an important characteristic called patience. But if he's impulsive, he won't have it. He's going to be very far from being patient. Plus, his conduct many times govelet berashlanut. Many times his conduct will be a reckless, rashlan, a reckless type of conduct, because he's not careful. He's the opposite of being careful. He may become reckless. You know what reckless means? Reckless is a form of poshea. He could have been careful, it would not have happened to him. It's not a mistake. That's reckless. He just does things without thinking too much, without too much thought, without any caution. You know what's interesting about the impulsive people? You can easily identify them many times. If they're buying stocks, they're usually the most aggressive ones. When you buy stocks or mutual funds or make investments, some people are more conservative and some people are more aggressive. Now, what's the pros and cons? The pros, the advantages of an aggressive investment is that you have a chance to make a lot of money. It's true. What are the cons, the negative? It can easily go down. Easily. Because it's not a very secure investment. You have some individuals who are more conservative in their investment. I'd rather make only 4% of my money. 4%, it's not a lot, but it's secure. It's a lot safer than the other ones. Well, it's a different kind of mentality. Everybody is different. Some people say, that's why most mutual funds try to mix a little bit of everything, so you can come out a little bit of ahead. One who's more impulsive will tend to be, not always, I don't mean to, this is not always the case, but a lot of times the impulsive person, he's not cautious, he's not conservative, he's not careful, right? He doesn't see the bigger picture, he rushes into it, oh, more money, right? You see how he works, how he functions? This is the way he operates, and he will be more aggressive in his investments. And he will make mistakes, unless he has a good mazal. Obviously, if a person has a good mazal, he doesn't have to know one word of English. And as soon as he comes over to this country, everything he touches turns to gold. There are people like that. but that's called mazal, right? I'm talking about regular people. You have to be careful. You have to see the whole picture. Person who learns to be therefore more deliberate, more moderate, matun, as we call it in Hebrew, he will gain more self-control. If he's impulsive, if he's not careful, he's not going to have self-control. It's impossible. If he wants to work on his self-control, he has to be more matun, more moderate, he has to deliberate, he has to be a little slower. And the combination of sablanut and metinut, the combination of moderation, deliberation, and patience will allow one who has a problem, who's had a problem with anger, to control it. Anger can be controlled only in part through these midot, savlanut, patience, and metinut, moderation. Okay, we've spoken a little bit now about pzizut, about caution and about impulsiveness. There's a famous passage in Chazal, in the Midrash, and some people use it today against the Jews. You Jews are impulsive. Yeah, we're impulsive. Yeah, you said na'aseh before nishma. When it came to receiving the Torah, Hashem said, yeah, you want it? He said, yeah, we'll take it, and then we'll listen to what it says. How could you take something, and how could you accept it without looking into it? Maybe you'll regret it later. You were impulsive. You're an impulsive people. You said na'aseh, we will do, and then we will hear. It was impulsive. How do you do before you hear? First hear, whether you like it or not. You just ran into it, you jumped into it? Yes, I'll sign here. Tell me where to sign. What do you mean? Did you read the contract? You're going to regret it maybe? No. We said naseh. And what's the answer? That impulsiveness was good. Why? People think sechel and emunah are very different. They cannot coexist. Sechel means brains, logic, common sense, and emunah is faith, blind faith. It's not true. True emunah is above sechel. True faith is above sechel, because true faith says, at this point, the sechel is not capable of understanding anymore. That's true emunah. The highest form of emunah realizes that there are things the sechel is no longer capable of figuring it out. Am Yisrael was so convinced of what they saw and experienced that their emunah was on such a high level that it did not allow the sechel to litlabet, to hesitate, to think about it, to know what's the question. That was correct, therefore, at that moment, to say naaseh, we have no questions. Alayni wala rasi, as we say in Arabic. Yes, whatever you say. We know that this is the true thing. Okay, as I always do, we have just a couple minutes left. Tips. How should one strengthen himself in this area of being a little bit more cautious in doing what he should be doing? Develop a responsible personality. Responsibility is very important. Not to decide on your own, to involve other people. If you're buying, a lot of people have problems when they buy purchases. They buy too much. Buy only what you need. You have to work on that. If that's your problem, you're impulsive in that area. If it's an impulsiveness of ADHD, we encourage kids who have the problem to verbalize their thoughts, because when they verbalize it, they talk about it, it slows them down. Make yourself a healthy routine. By having a routine every day, it helps you control yourself, it helps you organize yourself. Listen to people, don't interrupt their conversation. Train yourself to hear them very, very well first. Make yourself a to-do list. All of these things will organize you. When a person becomes organized in his work, he becomes more organized in his mind. I'd like to just finish with a beautiful saying, beautiful, that basically encompasses in this whole lesson of caution. Watch your thoughts, for they become words. Watch your words, for they become actions. Watch your actions, for they become habits. Watch your habits, for they become character. Watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. Watch everything you do. Watch everything you say, and Bezrat Hashem, you will have a successful life. Thank you.
So this finishes the series of midos?
Yeah, this finishes a series of midot, and Bezrat Hashem, next week there will be a special lecture on how and when to rebuke. It's a separate thing, especially for Rosh Hashanah, Tochacha. by itself, but this finishes
So if you'll do me a favor,
caution and impulsiveness.
and impulse,
Caution
right?
and the opposite, impulsiveness.
No, I need to, IMPULSNESS. Let me just write it down.